This episode of Workplace Stories, the People Experience Hub podcast, where today I'm joined by Nebel Crowhurst, Chief People Officer for organisations like Reward Gateway Edenred and River Island, where Nebel is going to be sharing her insights into inclusive recruitment, employee engagement, and the leadership traits that matter most. The conversation is going to be packed with loads of takeaways from modern HR leaders. This isn't one to miss. So thanks for joining us, Nebel.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Amazing. So this is going to be season one of our new podcast called Workplace Stories, where we hope to speak to some amazing people in the workplace, not just in HR, but kind of around the orbit of all of that. And I'd love to start by talking about your journey. And I know you've worked for some amazing brands and some amazing organizations and where you are today. But if we start with your journey, what really drew you into the world of HR, and how did you evolve that with companies like River Island, Roche, and Reward Gateway?
Yeah, it's interesting when you get asked this question and you take a moment to truly reflect and think back over the years that you've spent doing what you've been doing. And you're right, I've been really lucky to work in some really lovely organisations that have got great missions and purposes, wonderful people, and amazing brands. But actually, when you go back even further, when I think about it, my career pre-HR, like so many of us, we don't necessarily set out to be in the HR space, was really in kind of hospitality, bars and restaurants. I was a licensee. In fact, I was even a door supervisor. I had my door supervisor license.
I love that. I love
Um,
that.
so yeah, I was one of those people, sometimes at the end of a night, chucking people out when time was called at the end of the night. And when I think back to that, whilst it's a completely different world, you kind of think, well, actually, was it? Actually, was it something that stood me in good stead? Because if you can handle people in their worst states at the end of a night of drinking, when they're not seeing things rationally, and they're behaving really quite appallingly, then actually I think you can handle anything with people. So I actually think, without knowing it, all those years ago, starting off in life in that kind of environment, and being very customer focused, and front facing to the public, and dealing with, making sure that you've got all your staff in place, those kind of things. It actually has done me good as a grounding as I've then moved into the world of HR. But then if I move forward, so I started in that kind of hospitality space. I then worked in the travel industry and I had an absolute blast. Really, really fortunate to be able to travel the world in the jobs that I did. So I would advocate to anybody early in career, or actually any time in your career, if you get the opportunity to work in the travel industry, if you want to see the world, it's a great way to do it. And I was working for a company where I was kind of field based and delivering training, really product training, destination product training, whilst at the same time getting the chance to take people abroad for brilliant trips. And it kind of was that sort of stepping stone from training into then what the world of L&D looked like. And my first true L&D role was within Virgin. And I think that then was my real beginning starting point of world of L&D, then opening the door up into the wider world of HR and what that looked like. And it's from that stage that my HR career has truly progressed and got me to where I am today. But there were certainly times earlier in my career when I was in learning and development that I would have conversations with my HRD at the time where I would say point blank, I'm never going to be a HRD or a CPO. Don't want to do that. Ugh. And I never want to work in London. It's too much. And here I am, CPO, working for a company that's not only headquartered in London, but then we've got offices all over the world. So I've travelled even more so in my more recent career.
And I think it's amazing. Like when I think about that story, and you're absolutely right, hospitality is it's people at their rawest. It is, I mean, thin end of the wedge or whatever. It teaches you service as a leader. It teaches you to be a servant leader. It teaches you to understand the needs of another human in that moment. And it also teaches you, I think, because I grew up in retail and then later hospitality, it teaches you restraint
Yeah.
and the ability to just slow down a little, to think about the situation. And when I first heard about situational leadership, I remember my response was go and talk to anyone in retail, anyone in hospitality, someone behind a bar, or somebody who is stacking out the leeks in the grocery aisle.
Yeah,
Right? They know about situational leadership,
yeah, yeah,
right? They get it from the get-go.
yeah.
I think that's fantastic. And now look at that journey into this 1 billion plus organization, acquisition, all that flow through. And I guess like if we think about pivotal moments or decisions, you talked about never being a CPO or HR director, and yet here you are. Do you think there was any real pivotal moments or decisions that helped shape that final part of your journey or that journey into senior HR leadership?
Yeah, I think sometimes it is a progressive and evolutionary journey, and sometimes opportunities present themselves to you that may be unexpected. But definitely for me, what cemented my passion for broadening my view into wider HR was actually studying and getting my degree and my master's in HR management. So I know there's a lot of, I think, debate these days around questioning whether formal education in HR is actually needed or required to be able to do a good job. I don't necessarily profess to say that I would not recruit somebody into a role or give them an opportunity in a HR role if they didn't have their HR qualifications. But I do think it really gives you a solid grounding and it helps you to understand the full picture of all the different aspects of HR. So I think a pivotal moment for me was making the decision to actually embark on studying. So not only was that a big deal from a career point of view, it was a big deal academically because I would always describe myself as not um, typically gifted in academia. So the traditional school environment wasn't great for me. I didn't go to university. I travelled instead and I worked abroad. And so it was quite a big commitment to myself to actually say that I was going to study at that level. You know, I remember starting out initially with my undergrad degree and having to understand the concept of Harvard referencing. I mean, for anyone that studied, they know all that stuff. And for people that were studying as a you know an additional degree, it was fine. But when you've grown up in business, you don't do things like Harvard referencing. So it's a whole different world. But I think that was what was pivotal to enabling me to then have the confidence and competence to truly then have the breadth to be able to step into those bigger roles. But I do appreciate the debate around it. I think there's something to be said, of course, for the experience that we get, absolutely. But the reason I enjoyed studying at the time that I did was because it was sort of driven. I could apply my learning straight away in the work that I was doing because I was studying at the same time as working. I think that was the catalyst for me to then
Mm.
really step up into those bigger leadership roles.
It's interesting to hear that because you're right. There's so much at the moment around people being rightly proud about their journey through the University of Hard Knocks, through a University of Experience. I got to where I am today by, you know, dragging myself up at every opportunity. That sounds really dramatic, but um, that then engenders that debate of is a qualification necessary or not? And I think this is probably a whole
Mm.
podcast. But I genuinely think, interestingly, I never got above a senior manager in my in-house days. You know, I got to be like a head of X, head of Y, and I specialized. I lived in a specialist arena. I never ever was given that opportunity to be cross lanes, to be
Mm.
understanding the full impact across everything. And I genuinely think if I wanted to progress further, I would have had to have either had to have got so much experience that I would have been 60 years old before I could get there, or I had to have learnt it somewhere else. So yeah,
Yeah.
really interesting. And in terms of advice that you'd give someone starting out in HR, looking to grow, is it that mix of experience and education that you would advise them? But I mean, what would you advise them?
Yeah, it absolutely is. There's so many people in my teams over the years, but actually beyond my teams, where we've had conversations where people have come to me to ask that exact question, to get the advice and to get a viewpoint. And I've endorsed and supported people through funding for those that want to do their CIPD. Not to say that I kind of force it. You know, it's totally people's choices. But anyone that's got the interest in wanting to get their qualification, I think. people want to be able to grow and learn. I think where it's really powerful is where you've got somebody that's in what you would deem probably one of the kind of areas of HR that is it's a specialism, and they want to sort of step out and understand more. So, for example, even in my current role, in my current business, I've got people within talent acquisition that are studying for their HR qualification. And you could argue, well, is that really relevant? Well, actually, it is, because even in talent acquisition, you've got a very specific specialism, but actually understanding the broader nature of HR and where that might take you to the future, I think is very useful. So, I think everyone has to take their own path, and for some people, it'll be the right thing to do, for others, it won't. But I feel like what I learned through that experience was really helpful for me in terms of groundwork and kind of credibility, and being able to then have the confidence to move forward.
Brilliant, thank you. And I hope everyone who is kind of listening in gets part of that journey. I guess I normally do this stuff at the end, but I guess if someone wanted to reach out and talk to you about that journey, would you be happy for them to do that?
I love doing that. I love doing that. So
Amazing.
if anyone wants
We'll
that,
we'll
yeah.
put some contact details out at the end as well.
It's always a nice conversation to have with somebody when they're maybe at a crossroads, or they're trying to consider which way is the best to take them forward. So yeah, I love those conversations.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. So I guess I wanted to get into some of the meaty stuff as well. So a couple of things. I've known you for a long time. I think I met you when you were at River Island. Um, I've seen you do some keynotes recently and do some conference talks and some webinars around people strategy and thinking about the importance of an effective people strategy. And there was a few bits that really hit me as this isn't what everyone is talking about right now. They're talking about maybe the micro parts of a strategy. They're not really thinking about the effectiveness, the evolving strategy. Um, so in terms of an effective people strategy, what does that look like for you in today's workplace?
Yeah, I feel really passionately about ensuring that organisations do have a well thought out and considered people strategy that makes sense for the organisation. Um, it's actually quite astonishing how many businesses don't have a people strategy. They may well have an organisational strategy, but actually, in my view, to be able to achieve what you have set out in your org strategy, you need people. So you're going to need a people element of that strategy to actually achieve it. Otherwise, you're never going to get there. So for me, having a people strategy in place sets the tone and sets the direction of what the people team within the business is there for, how they add value, how they make a difference and an impact to the success of the overall organisation. So there's a couple of starting points you absolutely need to consider. First off, as a HR team, as a people team, you've actually got to understand what the org strategy is, and what the mission and the purpose and the business goals are, and what they're striving towards. You then need to take into consideration what's going on for the workforce in the business. What's the structure and demographic of the business, and the workforce within it? What are the kinds of people that you've got working in the organisation? What's the makeup in terms of desk-based frontline? All those kind of things. So I guess what I'm describing there is the starting point to build your data and insights. So the principle of evidence-based practice, really. So gathering information so that you can understand the landscape that you're working in, to be able to create a plan that delivers impact to the business. So utilizing employee voice, leadership insights, but also then taking into consideration external influences, what's going on in your industry, in the country that you're working in your competitor marketplace, and creating a plan that ultimately has a series of deliverables that are committed to by the people team in terms of what they're going to deliver over a period of time that is completely aligned with the organizational strategy. If at any point in the people team we're doing something that doesn't contribute to the business goals, we shouldn't be doing it. So that helps us to stay focused, but it also means that we've got a strong basis of prioritization. I think sometimes in HR we try and be all things to all people, and as much as I'd love to do that, our budgets and our resources are finite. We can't just keep saying yes to everything, and so sometimes we have to ruthlessly prioritize. But if we prioritize based on the business needs and being able to add the most value and the most impact, then it makes sense to people when there's points in time that you need to perhaps say no to something. So I think it's a business imperative to have a well thought through and well constructed people strategy that gives the forward trajectory. Personally, I tend to like working in kind of 3-year cycles, but that fits in with the organisations I've worked in. In some organisations, they may have longer perspectives ahead that you might need to align to. But if you are working in a 3-year window, as I like to do, it's that starting point of where are we at today? What's the baseline? What's the current environment that we're in? And what is the goal and where do we want to get to? And the strategy is the story that helps you to get there. The way in which you deliver getting there might ebb and flow throughout those 3 years or whatever time frame you choose. You may need to adapt, you may need to respond. In fact, you will need to adapt and you will need to respond because the market in which your organisation is operating in will probably need to adapt and respond because of the amount of change that goes on in the business. But for me, having a strong people strategy in place to be able to support business success is paramount.
I love that, and I love the linking it to the org strategy or the business strategy because I think I mean I don't hear it so much, but I used to hear the whole seat at the table stuff going on, and I was lucky that I grew up in a very commercial business of Tesco. So I grew up in a business where I would have to go to the board in kind of a middle management role and present to them how I'm going to spend money, what my return on investment is. And but that linkage between what we're trying to do as a business for our people, for our customers, always translated into ultimately we need to put cash in the tills. To grow our business, we need cash in the tills. That's top line growth. We need to
Yep.
manage our bottom line and we need to be able to get the balance between the two. And I think that when you have that approach in an organization, you're very lucky to grow there. And that's where I grew up. But I have seen it quite a lot where people don't think about who is the right person or the right people, what are the right skills that they need to deliver our organization strategy, our vision and a mission leads us here. Who is it today? Who is it tomorrow? Is it the same people who are growing and developing? Is it different tranches? Is it different teams? You know, are we dialing up and dialing out? How
Mm.
does that work? And if that thinking doesn't happen, how could you ever have a seat at the table if your people strategy does not underpin your ultimate business strategy and have clear sight on if you're a retailer, does your people strategy put cash in the tills and manage the bottom line?
Yeah.
If you're a hospitality business, how does your people strategy enable you to drive standards, customer satisfaction, manage the bottom line and grow the top line?
Yeah. Yeah. Completely right. It's about being completely in sync and aligned with what the business stands for and what the mission is, and absolutely driving revenues, or putting initiatives in place that help support save cash where you need to.
So, I mean, thinking about when you've been building the strategies, because again, this isn't something that I've been part of this in organizations, and now somehow I've ended up running an organization. So I have to think about this stuff. Is this something that you've developed over time? You're thinking on it that you now adapt, that this is the way that Nebel goes at this? Or is it actually there are some great models out there that I lean into at times?
Yeah.
How do you think about that when you are thinking about the people strategy?
It's an interesting question to ask because I've been thinking about this recently in reflecting on the organisations I've worked in and how I've gone about establishing the people strategy. And this is why I mentioned and I referenced kind of this 3-year window. Um, what I found is there is definitely a kind of model or a blueprint to follow that seems to fit very well into a 3-year window. And actually, in the capacity of my role at Reward Gateway, because of the nature of our business, in that HR people are our customers, they are our clients, I spend a lot of time with other HR leaders, helping them with how they set out their strategies. And it's surprising, maybe it shouldn't be surprising, how many HR teams and HR leaders do need help with how they actually pull together what their strategy looks like. So I really enjoy doing that and being able to support businesses beyond the business I work in. Um, and I'm actually considering whether it might be helpful to design something and actually put down on paper kind of the blueprint of going from zero people strategy and having a 3-year, window where you get to delivering on your commitments, and actually an award-winning people team. So what's really lovely about some of the things that I look back on in my career when I've worked with great teams in the businesses I've been in, the things that we've delivered have not only added value to the organization, we've been acknowledged externally by external bodies, and achieved lots of different awards and accolades, which is really humbling and a great recognition to the team and their hard work. So yeah, I think there is a bit of a model, and if it's something that people would find helpful, because I've been pondering it, I'm thinking it's something I'd love to be able to actually do. It might be my little side hustle. I might create like this kind of blueprint that helps
You should.
our leaders to go from zero to award winning in 3 years from a people strategy point of view.
100%, 1,000, 1,000,000%. I shouldn't say that as someone with an analytical background, right? 100%, you should do that. I think that we're living in a world where we're full of overwhelm, we're full of overstimulation. I was at the Festival of Work conference a little while back. You were there. I came away from that so overstimulated that
Yeah.
there's so much stuff to bring in. And when I see people in organizations, I think that's how they must feel all the time right now, which
Mm,
is the demands on their time at transactional levels, at tactical levels, and then at strategy levels for the same person as well to deliver all three levels
yeah.
is I saw a phrase which was a leadership consultant said, you're not overwhelmed, you're overcommitted.
Yeah.
And it kind of stuck with me a little because I felt like, how must it feel when you've got to do the hiring, you've got to put the PDPs in, make sure the reviews happen, do the pay review, run
Yeah.
employee voice, implement benefits platform, make sure recognition is across the business, and then try and make sure the strategy is fit for purpose.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
having a blueprint and something that lets people put stuff down would be incredible. This is your call to action
Okay, I'll
to
do it.
make that happen. Um, so sticky question then.
Mm,
I've worked in a few organizations myself. I have been the dissenting voice sometimes in that organization when I've seen the strategy. And I recognize that I don't see everything. I cannot see what you see, which is the overarching strategy,
yeah.
because I look after reward, for example, and I only see my reward area right now and its adjacent lanes. How do you take your team on that journey? How do you manage maybe dissenting is the wrong word. Maybe how do you manage that voice that doesn't see it? And
Mm.
maybe because you can't share everything, how do you get people coming on the journey with you when it comes to a people strategy?
It's interesting, and I've observed this in a few organizations actually. So in your example, you're the reward leader and you haven't got visibility of the overall strategy. My question is kind of like, why not? Actually, my perspective on it is the entire people team, and indeed the entire organization, should know exactly what's in the people strategy. So how you bring people on the journey is, first of all, when you're doing that piece up front, which is gathering data and insights, you're bringing your entire workforce into that because you're gathering their voice, and you tell them why. You tell them up front, look, we're embarking on designing the start of our new people strategy as part of the organizational growth. We want your input. And once you've got all that insight and information, you engage in your entire people team to co-create and design what the people strategy looks like. And even then, you go through a series of iterations where you kind of talk that back to the business before you go live with saying this is what we're standing behind and this is our people strategy. As you're designing and co-creating across the team, you should be having those feedback loops with the business to say, this is what we think we've heard and this is what we're focusing on. Does that feel right? Yes, no, tell us more. So that principle, I guess, leans into the idea of working in an agile way, which I've endorsed for many years and I really support. But everybody, so our people strategy within RG, and in the same way in previous organisations, has been designed and created not just by me in a room on my own doing my thing with my colouring pencils. It's the whole business. It's my whole team. And as an example, at RG, my team is spread over 4 countries globally, and quite broadly split around time zones. So it's tricky for us to all be together. So I go from Australia to the US into Europe. But at the point in time we embarked on designing our people strategy for here, I flew everyone over. We all came together, and we spent a few days together. Not only was that a great opportunity to build relationships across the people team, but the primary focus of bringing everybody together was we're gonna design this and stand behind it together as a unified team, and we're going to create something that's going to make a difference to our business. You then get the input, not only the input, but the investment and commitment from the whole team to want to stand behind it. So for people that are in areas of HR where they're saying, "Oh, I don't know the full people strategy. I don't know the ins and outs of that. I do my thing." I'd say actually put your head above the parapet and ask the question and say, "What I'd like to. Please can you share it with me?" And granted, sometimes there is some complexity. There may be some elements of things that are required to stay confidential. I recognise that, depending on where you're at in your organisation. But broadly speaking, what you commit to deliver should be shared. And then when you do launch it, you should be launching it to the whole business. So I launched the
Hmm.
people strategy to the whole organisation. We did a series of roadshows so people knew and understood what was in the people strategy, why it was in there, when we were going to deliver what we are going to deliver, and how we were going to be held to account and our measures of success.
So good. That is good. And I recognize it in time. I think when I have my own frustrations, when it has been that I haven't felt communicated with, that I haven't felt talked to. And I've got a vision, by the way, which is, and again, this is a very hospitality, very retail vision, which is we come together to collaborate, we come together to design, we come together to be in the same space so that we can all get the same message. And then we do this kind of big high five, and then we all go off
Hmm.
to be enthused and passionate and to deliver in our areas. And then we come back together again to enthuse, to collaborate, to check in again, and then we all go off again. And you can have specialists and generalists and people getting out there and doing it.
Yeah.
That is, yeah, that is super powerful, super, super powerful. Um, so one of the things I'm going to jump into something now, which I guess is a question which I don't want. I want to make sure this sounds right because obviously at the People Experience Hub we are all about employee voice. Um, but this is about you. So when you think about employee voice, how how are you implementing that within the strategy? How are you putting that in at the start, middle, end, throughout? What does it look like for you?
Well, I think it would be good to share that we work with you. So Reward Gateway and PX Hub. We're strategic partners from a commercial point of view, but then internally, I use your technology and your platform as my mechanism for gathering employee voice. So, and that's something that's been a huge enabler in how we gather insights from people. I think same thing, right? When I talk about different contexts and different environments, organizations need to take this in a way that works best for them and depends on where their workforce is. Is there a blend of using online tools like PX Hub, as well as then doing kind of in-person sessions where you're gathering information? You know, people's method behind that will vary. Certainly, from my point of view, the way in which we've used PX Hub to be able to help gather the insights is that initially I wanted to do a baseline check. I think when you're starting out, when you're creating a plan or a strategy, whatever that is, you need to do a baseline of where you're at today. You need to do your kind of benchmark of where do we sit against others externally. What do things look like for our people in the business? Because that's your starting point. That's your um, place to begin and start your story. So, typically speaking, I would tend to gather quite an extensive amount of insight at that point from people. And utilizing engagement survey tools can be really, really helpful there. The downside, I think, is that sometimes we fall foul of wanting to do everything all in one go. And so we set up these engagement surveys that are hundreds of questions that take people ages to complete, that when they're completing it, they're probably thinking, really, what are they going to do with all this information? There's just so much. So I much prefer to get a headline to begin with, and then do a series of deep dives or a series of kind of pulse checks to go into certain areas. Because if you get your headline themes, as your starting point. You've got a better idea of where you've got potential strengths and potential areas to improve. You can then deep dive into those areas in a bit more depth and start to ask some more questions. But beyond that, once you've got that starting point, you've gathered all the information from whatever sources you're gathering it from, and you're in that phase of actually executing against your people strategy, you need to check in along the way just to see how people are feeling and whether it's having an impact. So one of the things that we've experimented with at Reward Gateway is this principle of a vibe check. So I wanted to have an opportunity just to be able to do a bit of a temperature check. How are things going in the business? To give me an idea of where there's departments that are absolutely vibing and doing really well, and where there's departments that are perhaps feeling like less so. And so when we talk about pulse surveys, I think we kind of have the idea that we maybe do annual biannual surveys, and then we might do quarterly pulse surveys, that kind of thing. Well, the vibe check it was every couple of weeks, just checking in and just saying, look,
Mm.
if you reflect over the last couple of weeks of work, how do you feel? Do you feel great or do you feel not so great? And so I think utilizing technology like PX Hub, or there's lots of different ways in which you can do it to check in along the way is really powerful. What's important though is that you do something with that information. So I think we've all fallen into a trap where we have gathered so much data and insight. We've then gone, oh my God, we've got so much to wade through. What do we do? Then there's a huge lag to actually respond and react to it. People in the business kind of say, well, that was pointless. I shared all my feedback, but no one's ever done anything with it. And you get in this horrible loop. So you need to set up the way in which you gather your employee voice in a way that you can respond and react to it effectively, and take action upon it. And that can be in all different ways. Like I've said, you can do smaller, bigger surveys, vibe checks, pulse surveys, whatever that looks like. And I think that's the joy of utilizing a tool like your tool at PX Hub. You can adapt it however you need to. Um, and beyond that, it's finding those key milestone moments. So I know you've got, the principle around moments that matter. So leaning into that and saying, well, okay, when is it an important time to get an employee's voice? Is it when they've just returned back from maternity? How are they feeling? Is it when they've just come back from long-term sick? Is it at the end of their onboarding experience? How are things tracking for their first few months? How do we think about stay interviews and retention interviews? So there's so many touch points when you look at the overall employee life cycle that you should be gathering employee voice. But if you're going to do that, you've got to know how you're going to respond and react to it.
It makes so much sense. And when we think about overwhelmed people as well, and you're going, I need the insights so I can set my strategy and I can check in that my strategy is effective. And that's not just voice insights, that'll be other indicative insights too from across the business, but actually then taking action to iteratively either improve the experience or adapt the strategy
Yeah.
is vital. And I'm seeing a lot of people, and this won't be a podcast about AI, but what's really interesting is I'm seeing a lot of people, rather than doing what you've done, which is to design the listening we need that we can cope with, that they are saying we will take the sold tool, the sold solution, and AI is now going to come and fix the gap. So rather than looking at, is this a problem of design, they're
Mm,
saying we will live with the regularity that we're using, and our new provider or our provider will shove a load of AI into it to help us analyze it. And I will wait and see on that one, because I feel like AI has a huge place in this, but I don't know that it's necessarily the place that will replace great design of great listening.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that leans into the human element, doesn't it? I agree with you. AI is going to be a massive technological enabler. It already is. But we can't escape the fact we are human beings. We are
Hmm.
humans. How we feel, the emotions that we have, how we connect with other humans. I don't think that can be entirely replaced by technology. So, in the same way that we've used technology over the last few decades to be an enabler of efficiencies, this is just the next trajectory and sort of path in the growth of technology. It's there for us to make life easier and more straightforward, and to remove some of the laborious admin. But there's still a massive human element. And when we're thinking about employee voice, there's a human element to that.
Hmm.
To really tap into how people feel, not just how they logically think. And if I think back to some of the engagement insights that we've gathered when we've worked with you, some of the things that we've also explored is how we put feelings-based questions into our surveys, so that we can understand, are people feeling happy, sad, angry, frustrated, joyful? We want to know how people feel in the workplace. That's as
So
important as asking the question around, are you satisfied with your pay, that we always throw into every engagement survey. And let's be real, we always know what the answer is going to be. Well, I'd like more. And I think, well, why do
yeah, a little bit
we ask
more.
the question? Because we know what the answer is going to be.
I think you're right. I think it is so true. The design matters, and the design can change. I probably want to move on to a couple of areas as we close out our time. So the first one, or the first next one, is inclusive recruitment and skills, because and I can't remember where I heard you talking about this. It may have just been in passing. You may have been talking to someone else. I seem to collide with you a lot.
Yeah.
Um, so, but I've heard you talking about future-proofing organizations around inclusive recruitment, and tapping into alternative talent pools to ensure that you're not missing out on great people. Take me through that. I assume I know nothing, which is really easy to do.
Um, I think so. So when we think about, D&I is a topic that it continues to be hugely important and should, and in my view, stay front and center in the way in which we focus uh, on designing environments that are enabling people to be their true selves, and it should be a fundamental part of your people strategy. But how we recruit people into the business is really, really important, because if we don't present ourselves externally in our employer branding as an organisation that has got broad diversity and is truly inclusive, we're not going to attract different types of people to the business to then build out and grow our diversity. And my point around alternative talent pools, I think there are lots of types of people that we overlook in the talent marketplace. I don't think we spend enough time considering how the route through apprenticeships into the business can be really powerful in early careers. I don't think we take advantage of lots of organisations out there that support people that have perhaps been through either the criminal justice system or the care system to get into the workplace. And that leans into an area that I feel really strongly about around social mobility and diversity and social mobility in organisations. I mean, we touched earlier on the principle around academia. And quite often people that come from a lower socioeconomic background are less likely to achieve the level of career status as somebody who's perhaps come from a higher socioeconomic background. We need to do more to enable gender balance. So the approach that I take is thinking about our selection processes. So, well, first of all, thinking about your employer brand and how you present yourself externally, so people feel that they want to come and work for your organisation because you demonstrate yourself as being truly open and inclusive. Then thinking about the talent pools that you can tap into that are not your typical, I'm just going to go to a straightforward recruitment agency that's going to get me a very typical person to apply for this role. Think about those other spaces. There's some fantastic charities that you can partner with, supporting veterans and ex-military. Those types of people, I think not enough organisations work with external partners to be able to tap into those talent pools. And then when you look at your selection processes, making sure that the way in which you go through the recruitment process is done so in a way that enables people to feel like they've got a fair chance. And it's not a done deal if they happen to be somebody from either a minority group or they've got neurodiverse needs. So it's quite a broad piece to think about. And there's a lot of considerations as you design and create your recruitment strategy. But it's vitally important that you invest in it, because otherwise your organizations become stilted. You continue to recruit the same people because people naturally will find commonality with people that they like and they want to bring into the business. So I think it's about open-mindedness, considering people that you wouldn't usually from different communities, and encouraging that, and widening people's horizons on the type of people that can be wonderful employees in your businesses.
Just for anyone who's listening to this podcast who isn't watching, because we're videoing podcasts and we'll put it as audio podcast. Throughout all of this, Nebel was leaning in, was her eyes were wide open. There was passion and enthusiasm. I can, Nebel. I mean, I'm the joy of being on screen with you right now, and people who see this on screen will see that passion, enthusiasm coming through. And just for anyone listening, this is what I'm seeing, and I can feel that is something that you are so passionate about in terms of getting it right. And I love this so much. Personally, I grew up on benefits. I remember going and cashing the gyro from the post office. I never went to university. I did a year at college before I dropped out and became a welder. And my story has been one of feeling excluded in the world, of being proud to not have an education,
Mm,
but my values have been one about people and teams and stuff like that. And I remember reading somewhere that said most middle class organizations or middle class um, things like universities tend to be quite middle class.
mhm.
It's all about the hero, the rock star, the individualism of it all.
Yeah,
Whereas when you go and talk to people who are growing up in areas where you want social mobility, they think about us as a team, we as a community. And
yeah,
like the one thing I always remember was, if you can go around your business and look at your posters, look at your policies, if they celebrate individualism, you are probably going to feel exclusionary to
yeah.
somebody who comes from a working class background.
I love that. I love that. You're spot on. Yeah, and I'm the same, and this is why I think I feel so passionately about it. And for those people that are underrepresented, especially in the space of social mobility, because I think it's one of the areas of diversity that isn't being talked about as much as it could be. I'm the same as you. I was a free school dinners kid, and so the stats say that actually, as a free school dinners kid and one that only got a couple of GCSEs, there's no way I should be in the position of chief people officer. It goes against the grain. But if I can do it, then so can everyone else. And that's why when you asked me that question at the beginning of the call around if someone wants to come and talk to you to have some advice around what they do and which path they take, of course I'm going to do that. I love having those conversations for the precisely this reason, because I want to help people to be able to make great decisions and progress themselves to achieve the things they want to achieve.
And and I think when there's people like you doing this, then organizations fight against social norms.
Mm,
So you do not have to be the same as the societies and communities that you are living and operating in. You can change the world, because if enough organizations say, in our organization, this is what we accept, this is what we do not accept, this is how we celebrate and how we help people in different ways, that will leak out into society, and society will change. And we see that in history all through. So let's talk about leadership and evolving HR, because we're coming to the end of this, but I feel like I could talk for another 6 hours or more. So think about everything you just talked about. What you have beef with traditional HR practices, Nebel? Beef, absolutely. I'm a vegan, okay, so I'm not going to go into that because that's a stereotype. But what's the beef with traditional HR practices?
Um, so I mean, you used the term earlier on. The starting point with my beef is this narrative in HR around wanting a seat at the table. It's a phrase that is getting said so often, and I can't bear it. My response to it is, if you want a seat at the table, what are you doing about it? We don't just have to wait to be invited. We have to show up with credibility, with confidence and commerciality. So all the stuff that I've talked around people strategy, and being able to show that the people strategy is aligned with the business strategy and that we're an enabler of business success, that's you demonstrating you understand the business. If you understand the business, you'll be part of the conversation. So I'm really quite bored of hearing the term, I want a seat at the table. Just move on. If you haven't got the seat at the table, look in the mirror. That's where you need to be looking. Don't point the finger at the people in your organization that you feel frustrated with. Look at yourself and try and understand what it is that you're not doing to enable you to be part of the conversation. That then goes hand in hand, I think, with some of the things I get frustrated about around what I would call traditional HR practices. Because what happens is we do ourselves a disservice in that we play in the space too much of reactive, process driven HR. We don't step up and out of that to show that we're strategic, and that we work in partnership with the business. And I'll throw a few things out there, but that could be another whole conversation. But things like very traditional performance management. There's so much evidence that shows that it is not a helpful thing to put in place. In fact, it costs businesses to put traditional performance management in place. The principle of the annual appraisal, like, please move on. Like, let's just not do that. Go out and research the evidence that shows that that's not the best way to drive performance in your business. The dreaded 9-box grid.
Hmm.
I can't stand by those things and get behind them because of how poorly used they are in organizations, and the lack of positive impact they have. So yeah, I think it's because we fall into this space of very transactional, operational, reactive HR, we're overlooking the need to be strategic. And so that's where some of my beef comes from. And so when I'm speaking to people, I want to try and help them to see beyond that. Let's see beyond. Let's showcase what we're made of and how much of a difference we can make to our businesses. They're just a few of my little beefs.
Oh, preach, preach. I'm living this. I'm there. And an organization loves to get a model, a nine
Yeah,
box grid, and then we start with something that is freedom in a framework. So we've created a framework to think about where people
yeah,
may or may not be, where they could travel to, and then the freedom slowly gets taken away, and it's now a framework.
yeah, yeah,
Simply a framework that we now must live by, and who we can only have 4 people in that top right box.
yeah,
So the fifth person you just put in, you're going to have to put them somewhere else.
yeah,
Why?
yeah.
No, I'm not doing that.
I'm actually a leader with a bit of a potty mouth, but I won't on here. But I call BS on that. It's just don't do it. Challenge it in
Yeah.
businesses. Yeah,
And also, if we want to be inclusive and we want to think about different people in our businesses, different people learning at different speeds, different people achieving in different ways, parts of a puzzle that you can then say, actually, what I need is a mix. And I've heard people talking about personas, and I've heard people talking about um, characteristics of people in an organization that you need. And the other week in my own business, we're talking to a hospital, we're back to hospitality, talking to a hospitality, a pub company, and our head of client delivery said, we can create a pub persona. So rather than the individuals within the pub, we can think about that pub as a persona. Is it a high performing pub? Is it a low performing pub? Is it a welcoming pub?
yeah,
Yeah. And we can think about the characteristics. Is it food led? Is it wet led?
yeah,
And you can start building out pictures. But the minute you lock that into a forced framework, you lose all of the creativity and the ability to we innovate
yeah,
based on creativity and curiosity. Take that away, we won't innovate.
yeah.
Oh my goodness, can we keep up with this? We're evolving so rapidly. Can HR stay ahead of all of this? Can we
We have
keep in
to.
front of it?
We have to. We have to. We have to be the ones at the front of it, and that's where it gets exciting. That's where then sometimes I feel a bit sad, actually. Some of the things I see on socials, on LinkedIn, where people put some pretty negative stuff about, their life in HR, and I kind of think, okay, I hear you. It's hard. It is hard being in HR, no question. You need a serious level of resilience, broad shoulders, thick skin. It's tough going, but you've got to also feel very passionately about it. You've got to want to be in this space, and you've got to want to make a difference, and you've got to be at the forefront of it. If not, then I kind of think, well, maybe it's not the space for you, and that's okay. If
Mhm.
it's not the space for you, then step out of HR. Let's move into something that does bring you the joy that you need in life, in the work that you do.
And that proactive stuff that you were talking about before is all about, it's like those signs you see, which is like trip hazard, right? Trip hazard, or floor being cleaned. We warn people of the accidents that they could have. We warn
Yeah,
people about stuff. We're proactive in stopping someone falling on their bum.
yeah,
And but so often, what do we see? We see that we respond when the fall has happened,
yeah,
when somebody
yeah,
is sat on their bum and they are feeling hurt or they're feeling aggrieved for whatever reason. We then react,
mm,
and getting that proactive, it's almost behavioral, is it? A behavioral people strategy that says
yeah,
we get in front of things. We do not want to see our people fail. So if we see a trip hazard on the road, we're the ones running ahead
mm,
with our safety colleagues and our other colleagues in support of us, warning people, trip hazard ahead,
yeah.
helping them create speed and get going. What's the one thing everyone overlooks on employee voice?
Truly listening, I think.
Magic.
Really, truly, really listening. Don't just look for what you think you want to hear. Properly listen to what people are saying to you, however that employee voice is being presented to you.
Amazing. And if there was a big takeaway from everything that you've talked about today that you said, look, what could someone do tomorrow to start their journey to be in a more people-centric workplace? If they're going from zero, they haven't got your blueprint yet,
Mm.
right? But they're going to get it, they're going to sign up for that. What can they do tomorrow? What's the big takeaway they can take away, do tomorrow that starts them on a great journey towards that people strategy, that people-centric workplace that you've described?
I think it's look up and out. I think I've shared this before. Look beyond what's going on in your own organization, look up and out, understand what's going on, bring that back into your business, because that's what's going to help to bring you the credibility that you need, to be able to be well positioned in the organization to add the value that you want to add.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us on Workplace Stories. And I feel like we've had a lot of stories. There's more to come. I'm sure there's more to come. And some of those might have a glass of wine involved, I think.
Um,
So we can then swear openly and get it out there. If somebody wants to reach out with you and talk to you about their story and compare notes, how do you want them to do that? Is there a certain place you live? Is it LinkedIn? Is it somewhere else?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn every day. So LinkedIn's always a great place to be. Um, I'm on Blue Sky. I've got to practice better being on there more present. But I'm on there. But yeah, the best place really is message me on LinkedIn for sure. Yeah.
Brilliant. So Nebel Crowhurst, LinkedIn,
Yeah.
Chief People Officer at Reward Gateway Edenred, and they're going to come find you. They're going to come find you. Thank you
Um,
so much for
oh,
joining us.
thank you.